I'm excited to be with Jon Bishop. John's out of New Hampshire. He's teaching at a high school there. John wrote an article for the Catholic Exchange, A Crisis of Seriousness. We're all trying to figure out what to do about our young people today. John, I'm from Illinois. You're working on your master's. You're just about finished at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, studying poetry and Catholic intellectual tradition. That's my alma mater up here. I loved the University of St. Thomas. I hope you're enjoying it too, and as you're finishing up there.
Yeah, no, first of all, again, Jack, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be in the show. Yeah, I loved my time at the University of St. Thomas. I've been doing a lot of great things there. And I'm excited to discuss my Catholic exchange piece.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Like I said, we're in the belly of the beast here as far as education and all kinds of other things go on in Illinois. And what we're seeing it, and of course, this is across the country. The costs of education are skyrocketing, mental health issues are skyrocketing, and the proficiency standards are dropping like a rock. I just read, John, that only 30% of our kids across the country can read a proficiency standards in high school, and 30%. I mean, 70% are not there. And so a lot of people are experimenting, and I keep telling them, go look at Catholic education. The principals that I know, the people that are running some of the Catholic schools that I'm familiar with, their proficiency standards are much higher. They don't have the money to go around with the latest curriculum all the time. And I'll just leave you just with a couple other thoughts here before I have you come on. They don't have as much technology. They couldn't afford it in the beginning, and then they found out it's probably better to do without it. And they're picking great books. And this is kind of a segue into what you're doing, John. You're picking great literature and you're challenging them. Why do we even need to do that, John, today? Isn't it this just about getting a job and going out into the workforce? What are you finding? I want to pause just for a minute to talk about the assault taking place on our children. Here's the cold hard facts. 73% of all children 13 to 17 have seen online pornography. 100% of the young men that we're meeting have seen hardcore pornography. They're angry about it. These images are burned into their memories and their brains and affecting how they see others, including women in their life. The average age a child sees porn for the first time is under 12 years old. It takes just one time, sometimes by accident, most of the time by accident, to rob them of their innocence and obliterate their moral imaginations. Two things you got to do. You got to fill them up, and I'm going to get to that in the second part of the show with a program we have called Love Ed. But right now I want to talk about Covenant Eyes. Covenant Eyes is a way to take control of the content you and your family have access to online, and you have to do it before it's too late. My friend Theo and his colleagues at Covenant Eyes are committed to protecting families through their advanced online software. They also provide accountability and monitoring services. We have to be able to, monitor the content coming into our homes. So, step number one, go to Covenant Eyes. I'll put it in the show notes. It's covenanteyes.com. Use the promo code JP, the number two, JP, the number two. So John Paul II, and you get a free month to check it out. See the show notes, covenanteyes.com. Tell my friend Theo I said hello. Back to the show.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Jack. And I thought you beautifully summed up why Catholic schools matter there. Yeah, so my essay, A Crisis of Seriousness in the Catholic Exchange, I wanted to address this very topic. Spent my entire career in Catholic education. I found such freedom in the classroom. And when I started at this school 2 years ago, it's my second year there. I felt ready in my time as a teacher to begin implementing a course that I had dreamed about, really a kind of great books course for high school students. So I developed it, I called it Human Flourishing, asked them to reflect on virtue and flourishing. Students have read Aristotle, Aquinas, Augustine, Flannery O'Connor, T.S. Eliot, all great thinkers, and they're tasked with discussing them for 50 minutes, almost a full length class period. This approach, of course, is not
Now,
unusual.
when you say discuss it, so tell me what that looks like. So the whole class is reading the same book, would you say?
Yeah, so they all
Oh,
get the same reading,
okay.
and what they have to do is, again, I sit and observe, and they really just dig into the text
Okay.
together,
All right.
collaborate.
Does somebody moderate that, or are they open to just start to talk?
It is totally open. It is totally
Okay.
open. Yeah. So I mean, I certainly grade them, right? But I tell them, that this is not really about the grades. It is about digging into this material, learning
Mm,
together, right?
mm.
And I have found in the 2 semesters I've done this course that it has great results.
So let's talk about some of those results because I'm in on these conversations, especially in this. Look, I call it a corrupt public school system here in the Chicagoland area, and it is in so many ways. We're leaving kids behind. So I'm very, very interested. Give us some idea of some of the discussion that you remember, some of the things that you see being sparked in these young people that without that literature, without those discussions, you wouldn't have.
Yeah, so I'll mention one particular student, right? So she came and finished the course back in December. And in her final essay, I asked her to reflect. I asked all of them to reflect on the themes of the course. And in her essay, she wrote how these questions had existed really her whole life and had no language to frame it yet. And this
Mm.
course gave her that language. Um,
Okay, so this is so important, John. So this is what we find out when we go out to share with high school kids. So John Paul II Renewal Center, we have a number of different kind of apostolates under our apostolate. One of them is to go out and do high school retreats and stuff. What we find is when you give people the language and they start discussing it, they have this bottled up confusion, all these bottled up questions, right? That's what you're getting at here. And all of a sudden they have the vocabulary to start to express those things. Something new happens, doesn't it, John?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, these questions in human life are perennial. They are
Hmm.
cross-cultural, right? They're just genuine movements in the human spirit that really sometimes aren't given full shape without this kind of education. And I would say too, what my aim here, and I haven't made this as explicit with them, is this is Catholicism at its best, right? Catholicism is intellectually rigorous. It speaks directly to these questions. And I know in my experience when I was younger, I often had, until I went to a Catholic college and everything was changed for me, I reverted to the faith in college. Um, uh, we often, too often see what I call coloring book Catholicism, where it's just very surface level, right? And people, human beings are just
Way too
naturally,
much of that, John, right?
that's right. Yeah, and human beings are just naturally hungry for seriousness, right? And again, that just gets to the theme of what I wanted to do. Uh,
Yeah, well, we forget when these young people are in school that we have this thing called reason, right? And we were given reason. This reason and free will make us different than all the rest of creation out there. And reason is seeking the truth. What is the truth of things? And we're not addressing that. In fact, John, we're doing the opposite in most of these public schools, aren't we?
well, that's it. And and Jack, in your introduction, you alluded to what often happens, right? Uh, our discussions about education do sometimes fall into a political thing. And it certainly is. Education is political, right? It is asking us about how do we form people, right? But it just becomes about career, right? And that is something that is not unimportant, right? We want to know how, we want to live good lives, get good jobs, but we are losing an essential aspect of education when we just turn the school into a career readiness institution, right? Because if that's all it is, people don't need to go to school, right? We have a history
Mhm.
of autodidacts and others, but when we look at the true history of education, going back to say even the Greek Academy, right? This was an institution of formation, teaching us how to be more human.
Yeah, and how to treat one another. The basic things. When you look at John Adams, right? Where one of our founding fathers, and Madison would agree with this. He said our republic was made for a moral and religious people, and Madison said added a virtuous people, and it will fall. it will fall. So what you're talking about, John, is not just important for me to be able to think a little bit better or whatever. It's better. I mean, it's a way to run our whole country. It's a way to change the culture that we see. We're living in a violent culture where people have no problem lying to each other, stealing, cheating. I mean, this is what you're bringing up with great literature, right? That you say there is a way to live, and I'm going to model this for you through the literature.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And again, oftentimes when we hear critiques against young people, right? Well, they're doing this or doing that, but we're not actually, we have to teach them. We have to show them how to do these things. Human beings need models. We need,
Yes, they do.
we imitate, right? So, and when we look around and you're right, like when we see various pathologies in modern culture, right? It's really because people have not, I think, been given the appropriate, really virtue language and tools to, to be serious people and to be good citizens and to be,
Yes.
really think about the great questions.
And the great questions bleed right into my own heart and they bleed into my relationships. Talk about relationships because one of the things you say in your article is they start to talk to one another. They start to discuss, there are awkward young people out there because of the phones and the tablets and the culture in general. So we become we have pornography addictions. We have a lot of things we're doing by ourselves now in bad places sometimes, but we're awkward. We're looking down at our phones, and now you're giving them a chance to do what, John?
Right. So it gives them a chance to do something together, to do something in community. Human beings need to be in community. Thomas Merton
Yes.
said, no man is an island, right? So, um, and that's part of the process. I have them, even when I do non-discussion activities, right? They are all communal student-centered activities. So I've been blessed to say that the classes have been small, so I've been lucky to do this, but I'll tell them, I've asked them to, like, say, dig into Dante together. Say you're gonna do some research on Dante. They all have to work together. They all have to find roles for each other, and it creates this kind of, again, communal, collaborative spirit. Which, again, we're very atomized individuals today, right? So we need to, again, recover that sense of community, human beings doing things together.
And John, even from John Paul's work was so broad, right? But his theology of the body, how these young people even look at each other is brought out in this kind of stuff, right? Answering those big questions that John Paul would say: Who am I? What's my identity? How many times do we walk into a high school today, and even to a grade school, John? They have no idea who they are. It's unbelievable. Am I an L, a G, a P? I mean, we have to get the gender ideologies. Am I a racist? Am I here by accident? I hear there's no God, so I'm here by accident. So what's the meaning and purpose of my life? Well, there is no meaning and purpose then, right? You're just here by accident, random atoms hitting atoms. Why are we created male and female? We don't know these things. All these virtuous literature. And also, if I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the girl, I'm looking at the boys, and I'm starting to say, hey, we can talk to each other. We are a little different, but we can talk about this kind of stuff. And I can see the beauty of who you are, John, and start to understand who you are. And you might be a different skin color than me. You might be a different sex than me. And we find out we're human beings. We have some common, we have a common father in essence, right? And all of those things will come out when you're discussing things. I mean, I'm very excited about what you're doing, John.
Well, thank you. And I agree. I mean, like, the human experience is universal. Obviously, it takes different flavors per where you're living, and so on. But the human experience is universal. Human
Mm.
nature does not change. And you're right. Like, we live in a time where people don't know how to ask, "Who am I?" Right? There's nothing that speaks to the deeper notions of, the deeper longings of the human spirit, right? And again, what we really witness when people are angry and other things, it's really the soul crying out
Yes,
for
it
the,
is. Say
yeah.
that again, John, because our audience it sees this all the time. You see it in young people who don't have much patience anymore. You see it in old people that don't have much patience anymore. And say that again because it's very important.
That's right. So again, whenever we see various individual pathologies, right, this is really the soul crying out for love,
And truth, huh?
in
Love
truth.
me
Yeah,
in the truth and
that's
speak the
right.
truth to me in love. Edith Stein, huh? Teresa Benedicta would say, one without the other is a destructive lie. So I need to love you, but I need to love you in the truth. Well, what is the truth? And I need to speak the truth, but I need to do it in love. That's the relationship, right? So I can, with great literature, we're talking about truths, and we get to know each other and build the relationship in love. And are you finding pretty civil discussions and I mean, I would think that a good discussion has got some pushback, right? And how are they handling that, and what are they learning, John?
Yeah, no, that's right. And yeah, very civil. I mean, it's not a debate. It's more of like, how do we get to the meaning of what we're reading together?
Mm.
And I found that
Now, do they have physical books in their hands?
yeah, I always make sure I print it out for them. I think it's important to have the physical copy in there.
Yes,
They have
thank
to
you.
annotate it. They have to really mark it up
I
and
see. This is right. There's kids being in grade school now that we're meeting with. They don't even know how to write cursive. They don't know how to take notes. They're trying to print it's very hard to print quickly in a margin someplace, isn't it? I need to circle it. I need to write a little note. It's something creative that happens there. And look at we're taking writing and away from them. This is done purposely. But finish your thought, and then I'm going to ask you about that.
yeah, no, I mean, again, what I've seen here, and this has sort of affirmed something for me, is that the Catholic intellectual tradition is truly Catholic. It is for everybody, right? So, when I initially was thinking about this course, talked to friends about it, and again, this was never said to be demeaning or anything, but sometimes people would say, "Oh, well, not everyone's going to be into that. It's only a small subset." But in my school in this part of the state, we really do have a kind of wide section of people, right? And they're all getting something out of it. So I think that says
I
something.
would think, John, that you could take that model and at least, use it in any literature class to some degree, and important again to have something physical in my hand, whether it's the book itself or, like you said, you're printing something off, something physical that I can look at, I can
Right.
study. There's a transfer of that information, and it's more than just information, right? I'm starting to feel this. I'm starting to feel this. I'm starting to almost taste what's going on. My imagination sparks.
Well, that's exactly it. And again, people forget what a great gift digging into something is, like a philosophy, theology, literature,
Yes,
right?
yes.
It sounds almost absurd to say, but it's the truth. What we're really doing is communing with another mind who
Mm.
actually took the time to write this down,
Yes,
right?
yes. And
And
in most cases, a pretty good mind too, right?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And he's going to bring his time, his period in, but it still gets back to what you said, human nature doesn't change. We think, we're so progressive, right? We're so progressive, forget about the past now, forget about the tradition. And, you can go back and read somebody from 1,000 years ago. And if you didn't tell me, I mean, a little, update maybe on the language, spellings or whatever. But if you read that to me, I might not know what era it was in. I mean, I just hear something, I go, yeah, that makes sense to me, right?
Yeah, that's right. Again, this is why, even outside of my discipline of philosophy and theology, this is why, Shakespeare, say, has such staying
Mm.
power because we can look at, the monologues of Hamlet and such, and just see something of ourselves in these people, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. What were the students' favorite? Did they have a favorite book or favorite topics or something? Because when you're talking about discovery, I can remember back even as a kid myself, the first time you latch onto something new, or the first time I'm able to express something that I felt in my heart, and I go, "Ooh, I knew that. I knew that. I didn't know how to say it." nobody ever modeled it for me, but now that you did, I found this many times in John Paul's work early on. I'm going back, 15, maybe 20 years ago. And the first time I start reading him, and of course, he's pointing to Thomas Aquinas and Augustine, and he's pointing all over the place, right? It's not just him. He synthesizes this down, but he's grabbing it from other people, the early church fathers. And I go, I knew that. That's so exciting. Even for me, I was in my 40s already, or or late 30s when I discovered John Paul II, and and I said, I knew that. Nobody ever modeled that for me. But I would imagine as kids, this is what you're finding.
Well, that's it. And again, I think in some ways, I recognize that this could have been their last chance for to encounter some of these serious
Sad,
thinkers.
sad,
Yeah,
sad.
exactly. But I can point to the success of this. And again, I want to I want to be clear here, right? Like I don't do this as a personal success. I just think that the material teaches kids when they get serious things, like I pointed out in my essay, they respond. I had a student who was really into Dante, and I did some excerpts of the Divine Comedy with them.
Mm.
And I have him again this semester, and he came up to me and he said, "Mr. Bishop, look," and he pulled out of his backpack a copy of the Divine Comedy. He had gone to
See that?
Barnes and Noble and purchased it because of our time together.
I have a bookshelf full of books like that, and a lot of them I'm carrying through from high school. And the C.S. Lewis's of the world, the G.K. Chestertons of the world. At that time, it spoke to me. At that time, right? I could understand C.S. Lewis. I mean, he was my bridge to a lot of other people. And I still have those books on my right over to my right. I know exactly where they are, where they're located, etc. And I can't throw those away because I still go in and grab them because they're like. I'm not going to relate it exactly to the gospel, but they're like the gospel in a way in that I can go back and say, "Ooh, I see that in another angle now." "Ooh, that's touching me in a different way now." Just like like great literature, like Scripture will do. You can read Scripture. 2 years later, I'm reading the same gospel as we all know, and all of a sudden I go, "Oh man, I never thought of that before." Right?
Well, that's it. And again, that also gets to a secondary aim of my Catholic exchange piece, on seriousness. In some ways, I wanted to speak to the broader culture here too. Learning is exciting. Reading good things and serious things is exciting. I think we've forgotten this. And we can see that there has been a kind of distinct change, at least in the United States, on this question. If you look at the mid 20th century, like who were some celebrities, right? F. Scott Fitzgerald, Hemingway, like these are serious writers who were famous, right? Even if you go even earlier, right? G.K. Chesterton used to do tours. He would go to like places. Dickens did the same thing, right? We don't have that anymore.
No.
It speaks to another thing that's sort of a pet peeve of mine or an interest of mine is a kind of the collapse of our common culture, right? Like, when we're not reading the same things or watching the same things, I think it leads to a kind of frivolity, a lack of seriousness again.
Well, we could see that now. When you say a lack of seriousness, uh, what we see, and if you study education, public school, government education, you see that this is not by accident in a lot of cases. Like to get your, have you gone back and studied that? I mean, this was purposely done at the academic, the level, the teaching colleges. We're seeing in Illinois, we're seeing teachers, superintendents, and teachers that are coming out of, say, a Columbia University, and this is not good. They're really not taught to teach as much as they're taught to really push some of these ideologies. And some of them, the young teachers, I don't think know, John. What they're doing wrong, um, but they're shaping these kids in some weird ways. But as far as I see, as far as what I've read, and I've done extensive reading on this, the John Deweys of the world and et cetera, they were bringing this in on purpose and kind of dumbing down the education and really to take the virtue out of the government school education.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this gets to, very extensive histories of what progressivism is and et cetera. But no, I mean, again, I think what we're seeing is the fruits of a kind of, I agree, I mean, a project to move away from traditional education. And I think that the growth of, say, classical schools, like I don't work at a classical school, but I think it speaks to this. I think people are looking for for a deeper thing to assuage their longings, right? This isn't good for us. It's not good for us to not engage these questions in big ideas.
No, that's right. That's right. Now, I just did a presentation at a school board and I brought up these things. And I told them about a Catholic education. I said, I'm not going to come here telling that you guys need to use the Bible and put it back in the class. We know we're not going that in Illinois. But my point was just bring great literature in. Get away, especially at those early grades, with these tablets. Make sure we don't have the phones in there. There's a ton of great children's literature, John, from 50 years ago, 60 when I was a kid. That's just as good today, and authors have gone in and just updated them just a little bit, right? And I have one sitting on my desk right now. Remember Saint George and the Dragon? I mean, it's teaching virtue.
That's
It's
right.
teaching what is courage. One called The Quilt Maker's Gift, and it's all about being selfless. There's one more here. It's the Greek myths. It's for fourth and fifth graders. It's the Greek myths, and it's a big, beautiful book with pictures and stuff in it, right? And it sparks the imagination, John. And this is what I said to them. I said, you were struggling here academically, reading, math, other things. The kids' mental illness, the costs are going up through the roof because you have to keep bringing more and more people in to deal with the mental illness and the social problems we're having. And I wonder, what would it take, John? What's it going to take? Is it going to take a vouchers? What do you have in Massachusetts or New Hampshire? You're from, right? What do you have there as far as school choice goes? Are they doing anything for you there? Because I think this is the battle now. The battle that you just mentioned. There's a number of states now that are giving vouchers and giving you a rebate on your property taxes so that you can spend it where you need to do it. I don't know if there's another way out of this thing unless we get out of some of these government schools because I don't really see them wanting to change.
Yeah, I mean, I think there needs to be a greater recovery of really the ideas that we've been talking about, right? Like ideas don't
Hmm.
go away. Like people just need to actually say, this thing is pretty good. Why don't we try it? I would say a solution. This is probably above my pay grade, but I mean, I think if we have people who, um,
I think
like,
it's what we're talking about right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
that's
think
right.
it's you're right. It's not. We used to know how to read. We used to know how to teach. I should say how to read and how to teach basic math and basic civil, understanding of what it means to be a good citizen, and what it means to be kind to somebody, and to look past their race and oh my gosh, huh?
No, yeah, no, I mean, I think, and again, I mean, I think if we want to, so what I would say is, I think if we want to recover what we're talking about, there probably there's a multi-pronged solution here. I think the culture at large needs to recognize the importance of the humanities. And again, we can get to a variety of reasons why sometimes families will say, don't study this, it's not going to get you a job, right? But
Well, I think there's two reasons. One is what you just said. It's not going to get you a job. The other thing is they've been twisted. They've been infiltrated by ideologies and ideologues. And so I think that's the other danger. When my kids, two of my girls were biology majors, and John, they would come home and I go, "Where did you hear that from?" I mean, you're a biology major. I thought this was about science. Well, all these woke ideologies came in. My son was a finance guy, and or say a some kind of a skill that like an engineer. You don't get this stuff because it has to work right out in the real world. So my point being this, I was afraid to push them into too many humanity courses because I saw what they were getting, John. So I think that's the other side of this.
which and I understand, but I think also we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
No,
Like
I agree. I
yeah,
agree.
and
I agree.
we need good guides. We need people to show us because I know for me, my experience in college, I don't think I would have been somebody interested in the Catholic intellectual tradition and the humanities if I didn't have the professors that I did. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
went to Assumption College in Worcester, now Assumption University. You know, I studied with great people like Daniel J. Mahoney and others, and these people left a permanent mark on me. It actually even led me to discern the priesthood. I'm happily married now, but I mean, I wouldn't have had any of these questions proposed to me if it weren't for this. Um, so I mean, I think families can recognize that, you know, yeah, maybe they want, maybe, you know, going to institution X, maybe not be the best plan, but there are also great institutions like Wyoming Catholic College, Assumption College, like I went. And again, like, um, you know, we want to also, I think, take the experience that you can get there and bring it back to schools, right? Like, I think there's nothing stopping anybody from saying, why don't, you know, the kids are very capable of reading Aristotle, right? Like let's do it. And I've been heartened to say I've spoken to some public school teachers up here, and they're doing just that. They're introducing philosophy and such into
Okay, so
public
see,
education.
this is very interesting to me. I want to mention again this assault taking place on our children. You know they're being attacked through social media, pornography, other things. Earlier on in the show, I talked about covenant eyes, a way to control, filter what your children, what your family has access to online. Very, very important. Let me just mention here really quickly that we also have to fill our children up with what's true, good, and beautiful, especially the beauty of their bodies, their sexuality, and God's plan. We do that through what a program we have called Love Ed, Love Education. And we do this with the parents. That's so beautiful because we teach the child about their biology, what's happening to their bodies, and bring together that love story so that they know what their bodies are for, what our human sexuality is for. And the second thing, very, very important, is to bond the parent and the child together. So if a little girl has questions, she goes to her mom. A little boy goes to his dad. So check it out. Go to our website, jp2renew.org, JP, the number two, renew.org. It's in the show notes. And go find Love Ed. It's a banner at the very top and check it out. All right, back to the show. So
Yeah.
because I keep going back, how are we going to fix this culture? How are we going to help these kids? It has to somehow, if we're going to keep the public school systems, I don't know what, I don't see them trying to get, even though we're getting rid of looks like the National Department of Education, which is fine with me. Um, but if the teachers will bring this back into the public school system, I think the solution becomes bringing great literature back, and getting parents involved again. You got to have a good school board. You got to get parents involved, and you got to say, hey, we're gonna bring great literature in here, and the English classes and the history classes and et cetera, are going to use good books, and I think we might have to go back, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years to find those books, but that's okay. Then we'll do that. At least for is the subjects that we can, John. What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
No, I agree. I mean, and I think because and I think if we did something like that and just said, okay, guys, we're gonna read Aristotle, we're gonna read, we're gonna read Augustine or something, um, it will do wonders.
Mm-hmm.
Kids want to read stuff like this, and again, that's what led to my essay. Um, I think we underestimate how students we think students might reject this, but it's not true. Like they want to read this. Yeah.
We find the same thing when we're going in for presentations with kids. We'll have a high school, and we'll go into to present a topic, and they'll tell us, oh, these kids don't have more than a 10-second, attention span. Try not to talk about that too much or that too much. But I'll tell you what, it's not true. We don't find it's true. We find that if you get rid of the phones, right, when we're there aren't phones when those kids come in, and we present them with the truth, and we start asking questions. And man, it's a cool response to your point. Don't give up on these kids, because when we do, they don't find their way so easy. We have a lot of children, John, that are coming from broken families, children that have been born out of wedlock. In these classes, even with these younger people that we're meeting, with somebody with two dads, two moms. I mean, all these things, right? And so, if we could at least get them to open their minds to some of the deep thinkers from the past, and not try to pick on these individual people, is my point. Because when you start to talk about, reading Aristotle, when you start to read, Saint Augustine, or any of the great Dante, you don't have to get into, the black and white thing. You don't have to, always get into the, what does a family look like, because I think the public schools will push back on all that kind of stuff. So we're just going to have to find books that are going to get kids to think, lift them to a higher level, and start, replacing their moral imaginations that have been obliterated, and replace them with hope again. Give them hope. Give them hope that maybe true love exists. Maybe I'll discover something. Maybe life really is an adventure. Maybe truth exists. These are great things for to put a solid footing underneath somebody, especially somebody that's coming from a family, say, or a circumstance where they're just getting blown around by the wind.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, kids need hope. They need to recognize that life matters, and they need to recognize that they matter. And I think a way to do that is to have people read good books.
Yes, and here, let's finish with this. What's your thoughts? I mean, hopefully those kids have picked up the joy of reading, which will last them forever, right? For a lifetime, John. And you already alluded to that for this young man that went to the store and picked up Dante.
Yeah, that's it. And again, we live in a time that says it sort of dumbs things down, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but it says, oh well, as you pointed out, people don't have attention spans anymore. None of this matters. We don't need to do that anymore. But it's quite the contrary. We need to, if we give people the joy of reading and sitting with good ideas, it's going to do things for people. The moral imagination matters, the imagination matters. And the thing is, it's sort of like what Pope Benedict said about the conscience, right? The imagination in some ways is like a muscle, right? We have to flex it,
We
otherwise it
do
will
have to
start to
flex it.
wither.
Yeah. And what we're finding with this technology, it's actually rewiring those muscles. I mean, it's rewiring the neural pathways, and it's not a good thing. And we need to be able to sit down and relax. When we meet kids that are anxious, they're getting depressed. I mean, all of these things, are bleeding into this, John. When you start to, if I get lost in a book for a half an hour as a kid, and I'm taking notes and I'm thinking about things, that's that time where I'm not anxious. I'm not depressed. You know what I mean? It's starting to rewire my brain to go at a little bit slower pace, even though everything's wow, 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 wow. I'm finding things. These are good things, but it's not moving me around from subject to subject to subject to subjects, and nothing's sinking in. I think that's part of my anxiety is I'm hearing all this noise, all this info, but nothing's really sinking in. So I turn around the next minute or the next second, and it's just more information, and nothing's coming into my heart. I sit there for a half an hour with a good book, and I take some notes. That's sinking in. That's sinking in. That's changing me, modeling. Like you said, John.
Yeah, that's right. And if I can appropriate the name of your podcast, right? We bring in this stuff and it becomes a part of us. It helps us become who we are.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thanks for, and that's a good way to finish the Become Who You Are podcast. And John, you're a gift. You're a treat. It was good to have you on. Any last words? Any encouragement for all of us?
Yeah, so I would just direct people to read my essay, Catholic Exchange, Crisis of Seriousness. And again, I would just say, hope is not lost. Education matters. This stuff matters. Let's keep plugging away and remember that we can recognize that life is an adventure.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'll make sure I put a link in to your article in the show notes. John, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you again soon.
Jack.